Nedbank's philosophy of purpose-led transformation, which essentially extends beyond just legislation and translates into meaningful upliftment for both business, the communities within which we operate, and society at large. So I think, how does Nedbank as a whole actually make a difference and uplift businesses and SMEs? And we do this by way of, as you mentioned, incubation and training, etc. From my perspective, I think the approach that Nedbank stands by is the fact that we look at collaboration and co-creating. I think that's very important, because when you're dealing with human beings, you cannot have a one-size-fits-all. Different entrepreneurs, grow and develop at different levels, and that's an important aspect to be cognizant of. I think a lot of programs usually do have a one-size-fits-all, which is not necessarily the way it works in real life. I think when you look at youth and how do we translate that into more meaningful, sustainable business, for me it's a lot about collaboration and speaking to each other. So if you look at the codes of good practice, for example, where we look at skills development, there has to be a lot more collaboration across organizations, across institutes. A good example of that would be the Youth Employment Services, which is all about job creation, creating opportunities. I think we need to shift from job creation into job creators and looking at how can we support them, and that Nedbank's been a leader in that space, where we've actually said, instead of just placing youth in companies for a job experience, let's rather put them in incubators and let's train them and let's find out what their passion is so that we can help set up sustainable businesses.
I like that, the shift from job creation to job creators. Just, I feel like there's so many wonderful quotes that are coming out of this session. Poverty is a big business, and the shift from job creation to job creators. Nat, no pressure to drop a very important quote, but nonetheless, so you can make or take your best effort. But the opening question to you as well, in terms of the support of big business to smaller entities and smaller entrepreneurs, as a thought leader, how should you be going about doing this?
I think, firstly, the context is that there needs to be a paradigm shift. I think one of the speakers here mentioned mindset change, but it's more a paradigm, because big business is used to doing things formally, things that don't need disruptions, and also things that deliver higher value for them. But it's what we call extraction profit. But in the context of SAPI, is that one of the things that we've done well, we've got a strategy which is well aligned with the shared value principles. And in that strategy, one of the things which we say very upfront is the fact that we say there are three strategic thrusts that we'll focus on. The first one, it's underpinned by the UN SDG goals in terms of poverty alleviation and creating economic activities within the communities within which we operate. The second one has to do with how do we transform the supply chain, because predominantly it's established business, it's big business, and there tends to be a disconnect in terms of making the entrepreneurs or SMMEs as part of the mainstream of the business or the value chain. And then the third one, which is our focus area, is the issue of partnerships. It's gone are the days where big business tells its stakeholders. This is about, as one of my co-speakers mentioned, it's about partnerships, making alliances, collaborating to co-create these opportunities. And I think sometimes the tell mentality is not useful, because you tend to tell and they fail the projects and look back and say, why did it fail? But if you had done it from the word go, where you create partnership of common understanding, then it tends to be successful.
You got it. Gone are the days where big businesses tells its stakeholders. This is about partnership. Well done, sir, for your quotes. Nonetheless, I would just like to get a feel whether our online audience is with us. Can I just get that confirmation? Or wonderful. So, Bright, good afternoon to you, sir. Just an opening.
Good afternoon.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for joining us. An opening comment from you regarding, the Shared Value Summit. But our topic of discussion, more importantly, about the role of big business in supporting younger entrepreneurs. From the seat that you occupy, what should be done more effectively to grow a lot more young businesses on this continent?
Thank you. I think, first of all, we need to frame the certain well. And that certain is this very unique historical moment that we find ourselves in. I had a little diagram that I was going to show, but unfortunately, technical difficulties prevent me from doing that. But in this unique historical moment, we have the intersection of COVID-19, the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, the fourth industrial revolution, and the green transition, or the global energy transition that is underway in order to respond to climate change. Now, these four factors, COVID, after, climate, fourth industrial revolution, constitute a permanent emergency. So crisis is no longer something you respond to. Crisis is now something you build for. And if we do not, as Africans, take advantage of this unique historical moment, I fear that we will have lost it for many generations to come. And that is why partnership is so critical, because the division of labor that will enable us to build for a world of permanent emergency, because of the need for efficiency, obviously, because of the need for risk sharing, obviously, if those specific opportunities, which are now so intertwined with crisis, if that opportunity, that historic moment is allowed to go waste, we will have several generations over which period will have lost our most critical opportunity to transform our continent. So that's the certain. Now I'll address your specific question. I think there's a lot of talk about what the government should do, what big businesses should do, and I completely agree that the emphasis at this point should be on those with power and resources. They are the ones who must change for transformation to occur. The truth, though, is there's something that those of us that are smaller companies, that are SMEs, that are startups, can also do. Two things at least, or at least three things. One, we have to stop believing that the only way you achieve success in the market is to own the customer. There are too many startups in Africa building infrastructure end to end because they must own the customer. In most parts of the world, what you have is a business ecosystem in which people do small pieces of it and others rely on others in order to be able to service the end customer. So sharing the end customer is very important. If you want to be a supplier to Nedbank, MTN, all of these other giants, very often partnering with other SMEs so that collectively you can do pieces of the action could be one strategy that we adopt. So that is very important. The second thing is we need to start paying attention to standards. Too few African startups, and particularly in the technology space, of which I'm most familiar, are concerned about contributing to standards development. So one time I was looking at the IATF, these international standard setting committees, and Africans constitute less than 0.1% of membership. Sometimes contributions from Africans. The simplest example is how often we contribute to open source code, for instance. Very, very unusual of us that we contribute to open source code as an example in technology. How do we become important playing in standards, even though I admit that often the pressures of survival mean that we cannot devote too much of our time to standard development and things like that. But unless we are part of the thought leadership area, we will never be able to compete well enough with big business so that they pay attention to us. A lot of small companies have been successful because they came up with standards that big companies eventually have had to adopt. Think of cryptography, for instance. A lot of the PGP things did not come from big business. It came from small companies who were then acquired or purchased. So being able to play in the standards area is important. And the last critical area that I think small businesses ought to start paying a lot more attention to, apart from sharing the customer so that you can build synergies together to provide the services at the requisite standards that big business expect, apart from being part of the standards revolution. The third critical thing I think small businesses ought to pay a lot of attention to is playing to our strengths. Our strength is agility. And if small businesses are not agile, if you're not nimble, if you're not the ones coming up with the next generation of services, and all we want to do is to supply traditional inputs into the traditional ecosystem or supply chain, then unfortunately, it's very unlikely that we'll make much of a change. The reason why German small business is such a big dynamo of the German export machine is because they concentrate on areas where big business are unable to play due to the inability of big business to be agile. Thank you.
Thank you, Bright. And I like how you've steered the conversation there, because you've taken it away from, you know, the onus of big business and of government, but rather spoken directly to what smaller businesses need to do to get themselves perhaps a bigger slice of the economic pie. But with that said, one can't ignore the fact that big business still dominates, and big business has got the muscle to, you know, muscle out a smaller player who might actually tick the list of the items that you've mentioned. And therefore, Omondi, to bring you in the conversation, welcome, sir, on the question that I had directed to all the other speakers about big business and their role in supporting entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, a lot more. In your humble view, what should big business be doing at this juncture, sir?
So thank you, Fifi. I'm glad to be here. Earlier on, my CEO of Safaricom was here. So maybe a quick brief on that. Safaricom is one of the largest telcos in Africa. And actually what we're looking to do is to move from just being a telco to becoming a technology company. And in this issue of shared value, it's actually essential for our survival as a business that we create value as we do business along. So I had DigiFarm, which is the branch of Safaricom that looks to digitize agriculture and make our smallholder farmers a lot more productive. And my mission is very simple, is to create wealth for smallholder farmers. And that might seem a little bit odd for a telco to be engaging in. But if you look at our base as Africa, well, in about 10 years' time, we're going to be the largest population in the world. We need to feed ourselves. We need to be able to engage in serious agribusiness export. And right now, we are mostly importing. We are mostly, if you look at the value of our yields across Africa, we are below average, actually. Yet we can actually transform these yields quite quickly. So back to what big business can do. So Safaricom is a big business, $1 billion revenue. We have about 800 suppliers, 400 dealers across the country, 250,000 agents. And I want to start by these 250,000 agents, because these are people on the ground. They're small SMEs. Every day they sell airtime, they sell mobile money, they do all these things. And that's just one sector of the economy where we've played. So if you take that model and then you push it into agriculture, right, you find that it's actually a lot more powerful, because in agriculture, we have about if you take Kenya alone, we have about 7 million farmers. If you take Africa, we are nearly 100 million farmers. When I was in Diageo doing local sourcing, you got millions and millions of farmers, which I think the first speaker said poverty is actually an opportunity. I think it's one of the biggest businesses we have to unlock. So in DigiFarm, we look to provide end-to-end services to these farmers, right from how do you plan yourself, information, weather, all these things, to inputs, credit, and the rest. And where can young people play? I think that for a long time, agriculture is what you did when you failed in school. So if you did everything else and you didn't succeed, you didn't become a doctor or an accountant or a manager, you went home and you worked on your farm. I think the world has changed quite a bit. So just to unpack a little bit from what we do in DigiFarm, if you look at how we involve in agriculture, you've got everything from mechanization, drone services, logistics. I need aggregators. I need guys who can actually give me climate information. I need guys who can actually do software development. So there's a very long chain of businesses that are waiting to be unlocked. And Fifi, to your question more specifically, so how can a big business like us enable young entrepreneurs to participate in this value chain? I think the first thing is just awareness. I can't tell you how many times I'm moving around talking to small businesses, and they're actually not aware that they can today come and supply these services to the big business. So I think awareness is a very big piece of the conversation. I think the second bit is a lot of times, even if you're aware, you don't, there's no belief because you think I don't have capital, I don't have this and that. And I think capital is normally the first culprit to be blamed for lack of action. But I think a lot of it is actually capability, being set up the right way to be able to integrate into these systems. And I like Bright's point around, don't think of it as an island, as yourself trying to actually supply into big business. Think of it as, could I collaborate with somebody else to make this happen? Right. And in DigiFarm, we're seeing that working quite well. That what we do as big business is provide the ecosystem. So if you're a young entrepreneur, and what you can do very well is provide open as stockist in your local village supply farmers. Then what we do is then integrate you all the way backwards to the manufacturer. So if you're talking to Bayer, Syngenta, or Yara, the big business groups, we provide an ecosystem where you as an entrepreneur at your level, you can actually begin to create a profile for yourself, and you can grow and become the biggest distributor in your region. You can grow to become the biggest distributor in your country and probably across the world or the continent. But we got to begin somewhere. And I think agriculture and digitization or telecoms is actually a very powerful place to start. So I think there's so many issues to be unpacked, but the three for me are A, awareness. Let us make them aware of where they can participate. B, provide the platforms so that it's not an impossible journey to actually become this entrepreneur. And then one thing that we cannot avoid across this conversation is actually the issue of capital. And in agriculture, we found it very interesting that, like for us as a telco, we actually have to deploy capital to then back up the entrepreneurs in our ecosystem. And we are not a bank. I mean, we could have said, look, I'm not a bank. My job is to give you the technology and the opportunities and then go sort out yourself. But I think that is cheating ourselves a little bit, because we know that at the end of the day, for young people in Africa to actually then become active in these ecosystems, capital becomes a significant issue. So I think we can deploy capital better. We can deploy them in areas where there's absolute shared value, like agriculture. There are many areas like health, education, or the rest, but I'm just using an example where I do every day. You know, there is loads of opportunity. There's loads of business to be done. And I think it's time for us to then unlock it. So I think I'll pause there, Fifi, and give it back to you.
Amanda, is that a cock crowing there?
Yes, I'm on the road. Yeah, I don't know.
All right.
The background
but
is
a wonderful place to pause it. Just highlighting maybe two of the constraints: the access to capital. Yes, ma'am, I'm looking at you. And also the transformation of the supply chains. And so let's begin with that. And Beatrice, I'm really interested in your journey in business, because you spent the majority of your career working in the public sector across development finance institutions and development institutions all over the world. And then you came back and you went into business. And just on that access to the supply chain, ma'am, what was your experience in getting your foot in the door? What were the challenges you experienced, and how did you overcome them?
Thank you, Fifi. I think I had a good start in terms of that I went in the horticulture with more of the contextual situation that my country, Rwanda, just came from. You know, it was just after a few years after the genocide, and some of us who were in diaspora and who were doing quote-unquote well, were feeling guilty for being alive and we had to go home and contribute. And I think, just to go back to what Omondi just said, looking at the economic situation and the humanitarian crisis that we had, the only sector that was offering jobs and immediate employment for widows and youth was agriculture.
Sure.
And for me, and of course, I was telling my sister here when we were sitting there, he said that, sometimes we tend to think that entrepreneurship is a solution to poverty. It is not. Entrepreneurship is character. You have to have a character. We have to, to take risks and to see the opportunities where other people are not seeing. So I had the choice to do many things, obviously, but I decided that the reason I'm going home is going to create employment. So, of course, I had a start, as I said. I could write a good proposal. I could, access fund. But I think the most challenging thing was the fact that I was a woman. If I was a man, I could have done more. And then I was in a sector that was very difficult. I'm from a low country, which we don't have access to the port, and I went into a very challenging sector, horticulture. I'm a rose grower, and exporting fresh cut flowers from a landlocked country that's just coming out of this program, and taking my flowers to Kenya in transit, and then to the international auction. With all the knowledge, with all the connections I had in the world, it was difficult. But I think what pushed me was to show that the young population, that anything you said to do, especially the women, you can do.
Sure.
And I think the challenge is access to finance, not because I couldn't do it, just because I was a woman, and the mindset of that's 2004. I'm not, it hasn't changed maybe much, but it was that a woman can do business, but up to a point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so if you start now trying to do big business, then you're really not allowed in, yeah?
Sure.
Even though you are protected. So the challenge was access to finance, which today, you look at what really our business need is access. Again, I was discussing that with my sister here, that we need affordable and flexible finance to finance our SMEs. So when I saw how challenging it was, me who had access, who grew up in business, because my both parents were in business, and I'm like, what is it really to be an SME, to be able to access that? So that's why I decided to start with One Africa, and to be able to, not assist, but prepare and impact with knowledge in, for how to have a successful business. So we have 4 pillars: access to finance, market access, trade facilitation, and agri-technology. And as Omondi said, access to finance is important. But we've been talking about this for the last, 30, 40 years. But COVID again has shown us that really, if we don't have affordable and flexible finance to be able to finance those SMEs that have lost their businesses because of COVID and with the lockdowns, it will not happen. And when it comes back to logistics and supply chain, we don't have the infrastructure. I think Mr. Kebo from the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce talked about that. We lack infrastructure. Where there's air, sea, and road, we have lack of that. And we lack industrialization in agro-industries or any other satellite industry for packaging, for value addition, for packaging, for processing and branding. We don't have that on the continent. I think few countries, maybe Egypt, South Africa, Ivory Coast, and the Northern Africa are ready to a certain extent, but we don't have that. So it makes us very difficult in the supply chain, because we have to add value to make even the supply chain to be able not to have loss on that.
Yeah.
So it is really, the finance is a challenge, but we have to
stay on the financing.
Yeah.
Let's stay on the
we have
finance.
to pin it down and say that we need affordable and flexible.
Okay.
Affordable meaning that we can afford it, the low interest rate, but flexible also to say, okay, this is the profile of this small enterprise. If they don't have access to financial literacy, they don't know what is a bank account, they don't even know what's the loan and how to service the loan. All those difficult terms, they don't know about it. So you cannot really access something that you don't know. And
okay,
so
let's stay there.
The big
let's
business
stay there and
area.
bring in Namala to just respond. And, so quite often it's and I'm sure you get it all the time, that it's the banks and the financiers that are making it very difficult for small businesses. I was in a discussion with another big bank on the continent, and as to why banks don't fund startups as much as perhaps the guys that play in the venture capital or the private equity space to a degree. And this gentleman said that, well, it's because if it was speaking to another guy, and he said, you know, you put your money in my bank, and the day that you want to take your girlfriend out for dinner, I need to be able to give you that money very quick. You don't want to hear that, no, your money is, you know, it's still stuck in a particular SME and it's growing and it will become valuable over time. You want your money now. And so there's a certain level of risk that as a bank I can take and unfortunately that I cannot take. And so I'd like to understand from your point of view, as Beatrice has said, 2004, access to finance was difficult. Not much has changed almost 20 years later. But from a point of a financier, how can small businesses improve their prospects of not being turned down? What are some of the common mistakes you find in your dealings with them that they do make that contributes to the narrative that access to affordable and flexible finance is hard to reach?
Great. So I just want to take a step back there. I think in the current day and age, big business, including financial institutions, public and private sector, have serious commitments to making sure that they are relevant to SMEs. That's where they're the lifeblood of our economy. We want to be relevant. Best we understand how they operate and create products and services to be that are user-friendly in their space. So I think there's a lot that is changing most definitely, and it's actually a transformation imperative that they are relevant. So it's definitely happening. I think the bigger question or the bigger issue here is the awareness and the understanding, the knowledge around when I apply for finance or apply for a certain product, when I disclose certain information or I withhold, what does the bank or the financial institution actually interpret? And that is when Nedbank is coming to the party. We actually bridging that gap by creating more awareness sessions, literally opening up an application and having a one-on-one and saying, if you tell us X, Y, and Z, this is what we interpret, because we're able to plot trends and behavioral patterns, and this is what we know even though you're not telling us upfront. So that kind of information is critically important for an SME, for an entrepreneur to know and to understand. But I also want to say that from a Nedbank point of view, we've taken it a step further. I think it was from 5 or 6 years ago already. We actually got in a room of the sort, a whole, I think it was between 15 and 20 incubators and training programs, initiatives from different sectors. And we had a absolute open discussion around the fact that they are a critical component between the SME and the bank. So we are working very closely with these mentors, these specialists, to be able to mitigate certain risk elements that the bank will normally say, I cannot get involved because I'm not sure. By working and actually resolving some key factors that would otherwise not enable an SME to get access to finance or products and services. It's actually a journey. As we know, entrepreneurship is not a once-off, I apply for a product and that's it. It's a journey. Your needs are constantly changing. Your business is growing. There's so many different aspects. One of the key findings for us after this engagement with incubators and sector programs is that access to finance is not the most important thing. It is in the bigger scheme, but actually access to information, having those specialists and that big brother to help you along the journey is even more critically important.
Okay, but just also briefly to Beatrice's point of being a woman and the experience there that has been different to that of a man knocking on the bank's door. Perhaps things have improved a bit, but they've still got quite a lot more to go. How has your sector with the pandemic in the past 18, 24 months, how has there been a change in the risk premium that is attached to giving a female-owned entrepreneur capital as opposed to a male-owned entrepreneur? And has that change been for the better or for the worse in your view?
I think it's definitely improved. I think we're very cognizant of the gray areas that opens up an SME to risk. To give you an example, we're currently launching a nationwide program aimed at women-owned businesses specifically, and the end goal is actually business plans with the view to funding it. But the journey is actually support business development, access to mentors across a period of 12 months. And those are the kinds of initiatives that we are doing to bridge the gaps and to eliminate. I think it's a process of learning. It's a process of working together. So absolutely, like I said, if institutions are not getting their act together, they're going to be irrelevant to the market in a short space of time.
All right, okay, got you. Bright and Omondi, we still see you guys there, sirs. We are coming to you in just a moment. And just speaking to the issue around transforming supply chains, Nat, which you raised. And I know that you do a lot of work in this space. But there is a view that, business does business with people they trust. And there's a view that trust is developed and it's worked on over time. And therefore, it's very easy to be comfortable in the relationships that you have built trust with over the years. And in doing so, make it a little bit more difficult for those who are coming into the market to want to establish a trust relationship with you through your supply chain. Can you tell us, in your view, the work that does need to be done to transform the supply chain, to maybe spread the trust a little bit more and allow other players to establish trust with big business, maybe speaking to your supply chain at SAPI?
Okay. I think the key thing really for me is firstly about when you talk about supply chain transformation is that they need to be an integral part of your value chain. There is no way that you're going to be successful if you say that you're creating these entrepreneurs, but they must be in the lower risk of the business in terms of contributing to your profitability and the rest. They must be part of that value chain because they add value to your organization. The second part in terms of the question, in response to your question, is the fact that there's this developed trust over time. You know, business has changed significantly. You either remain as you are or you move with the people who are more progressive. So if you want to be progressive, you have to introduce new things. And therefore, you need to freshen up, if I may use that word lightly, your supply chain with new people, with new ideas on how to do business. And it's risky, yes, I agree, but business is about risk and rewards. So there's nothing new about it. For me, it's a moot point. So if I may make an example in terms of one of our flagship projects that we've been having for many years, and I had a lot of people talking about agriculture and the rest. It's in the agricultural environment, but a different take on it is that it's in the forestry. SAPI it gets about 60% of its input costs from timber. So we've got close to 1,902 entrepreneurs in South Africa growing timber, and mostly they're in the rural area, and mostly are women, black women. And this, over time, has contributed to them contributing to SAPI's value chain in terms of more than 20% of our requirements. But it's successful because it's part of the value chain. It's not an isolated, orphaned project like many of the CSI programs they are. The second thing I need to mention is that if you want a sustainable enterprise development, you need to have what I call package approach in terms of the support. And I'll just mention some of the things that I'm talking about. Firstly, we heard about access to finance. As an organization or company, you need to commit to be able to do that, because we know it's a reality that entrepreneurs, initially, they're not bankable. It's a reality. So SAPI, in this respect, we are committed by providing that funding, interest-free for that matter. We also provide the CAPEX or capital infrastructure that's needed for them to produce the goods that they supply to us, and we've been doing that for many years. And there's also non-financial contribution. You cannot do it at arm's length by getting consultants to come and do it for you. It's not sustainable. When they leave, it collapses. So we've got about 50 dedicated full-time resources that are supporting this program nationally at a cost of about 60 million per annum. So, and the last thing that I want to mention, we're talking about trust between established and the entrepreneurs, is that you need to have a conversation and partnership with your established supplier base. because the reality, you only have this cake to share. If you bring in entrepreneurs, they're going to cannibalize whatever they had. So it's not about them losing the business, it's together making a sustainable journey together. And I think incentivize those established suppliers. If it's eroded their business, then extend their contracts for longer term so that they can still, come at where they started.
All right.
So it's about opportunities, looking at things differently. Last one is that you need to improve ease of doing business. There's no point in bringing an entrepreneur and you're still caught in barriers such as bureaucratic, administrative, paperwork, and the rest. You need to simplify these processes so that it's easy to do business with the likes of the corporates. And also part of it is look at technology. There's a lot of technology enablement that eliminates that administrative burden. And in our case with this Khulisa program, we're providing mobile telephony as well as mobile apps related to their field of agriculture, where they can communicate as well as self-service and transact with the organization.
All right. Thank you. Omondi, to bring you in, sir, and still sticking to the same issue of transforming the supply chain and bringing more young businesses in that supply chain and bringing more women-owned businesses in that supply chain. I'm interested in how you managed to do it at Diageo. I imagine that it took a bit of work. It took a bit of changing of the mindsets of the guards at the time. Can you just share with us that experience and how you did manage to achieve that, such that the product that Diageo got to make its wonderful drinks were more locally sourced?
Yes, so I think it starts from leadership. So Diageo in 2013, similar to Safaricom, our Africa leadership from our Africa president decided that was the direction we were going to go. So when we began, we were still making those wonderful products, but we were sourcing about less than half from Africa. I mean, we could continue like that for decades. So I think the leadership is quite important. I think that's why I'm glad to join sessions like this, because we need more African business leaders who take those bold steps. And the second bit is that they made it public, right? So it wasn't like an internal decision which we could change every year and change the target. The goal was we wanted by 2020 to source 80% of our products locally. And that was made public to investors. It was made public to the communities where we're operating, to government. So there was accountability because people knew this was the direction, this is what Diageo wanted to do. And therefore, the whole business rallies around that goal. So let me go a little bit into the how. I think the how is where a lot of times these things get very, very murky. Because at the bottom of our supply chain was still smallholder farmers. Let me give an example of Ethiopia. So when we were in Ethiopia, we needed to source about 10,000 tons of barley. And when we began, we were sourcing zero. And if you look at that market, you got millions and millions of farmers, maybe tens of thousands of barley farmers, but they are small. So the how was really, really important. It was around organizing farmers into groups. Back to the point that was made earlier, being very package focused, to say if smallholders are going to then deliver value to the business, then we need to actually make sure that they can grow the crop, they can harvest it, transport it, deliver it. And that created a lot of business actually for a lot of people, including young people. So I think the experience was that it requires leadership, it requires investment. We invested millions of dollars every year in terms of making this work. In the first years, we lost money. So it wasn't a very rosy story from day one. But I'm glad to say that Fifi, overall, when you look at the current situation, Diageo, where I worked before, actually makes more money sourcing locally than importing. So it's actually, at the end of the day, a very solid business proposition. So back to supply chains, I think the leadership is quite important. If we want to say that big business needs to source from young people, it needs to be an actual business mission to say, it's not just about, if I'm in DigiFarm, it's not about just how much I source, it's measuring how much do I actually source from young people. If it's about gender, it's about measuring how much do I actually source from women farmers, and then making that an actual target. Because in business, unless it's a target, we are basically not going to be focused on it. So I think the leadership was quite important. The investment was critical at the end of the day. And then what we found out was that actually a lot of the farmers and young entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in Africa are actually quite reliable. They're actually quite trustworthy. Our repayment rates in Ethiopia for finance was about 95% within 3 years. So we come from below 50 to 97%, 95% within 3 years' time. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions about the young entrepreneurs and the farmers and this informal sector that actually, if you deploy capital, you not get it back. But I think those misconceptions need to be treated using data by big business actually then investing behind them and making them work. And I know I've taken a lot of airtime on this, but it's not just a job for the bankers, So you don't just say, look, we want to get the supply chain figured out, financing figured out, let's get the bankers to do it. I think everybody needs to put a skin in the game so the bankers feel comfortable to actually invest behind it as well.
All right. Okay. Noted. Just a quick one. Any questions from the audience thus far? There's a hand that's been raised there. Ma'am, do we have mics? Just so that the virtual attendees can also hear you.
Hi.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much for the experience insights by the speakers. Just some questions for the lady from Nedbank, in particular, and perhaps Happy. I've just completed my business education, and of course, business is focused to a large extent on shareholders. Shareholders have a share; they have a vested share in the businesses that you contribute and participate in. And my question is, reading some of the Nedbank annual reports, reading Old Mutual annual reports, reading SAPI annual reports, etc., is that what do shareholders ask at shareholders meetings, at the shareholder forums, to entrepreneurs by yourselves as to what is the value that you're delivering to the entrepreneurs? I commend some of the initiatives that I've heard from Diageo, from Nedbank, from SAPI. I actually know the SAPI one quite well. But yeah, are they educating themselves? Because then they might have a better understanding and appreciation of what it is that their investment is contributing to, and more actually understanding of what their share is worth from a sustainability perspective. Thank you.
Okay. That's a good question, actually. Do they ask about the value, or is it just about the profits, in your view?
So I just want to understand the question properly.
So she was asking, what do shareholders ask at the various the big meetings, the annual meetings, or the results meetings? What do shareholders ask about the value that their shareholding is actually creating for entrepreneurs? Just last week, there was a research report by PwC that said that investors would actually be willing to divest from companies that were not upping or pulling up their socks when it came to their ESG scoring. So to that point, have some of your shareholders been asking critical questions about the value that Nedbank and SAPI is creating? If we can just keep it very brief. Maybe Nat, to begin with you.
So I think it's all part and parcel of that whole developmental process.
Cool.
We absolutely, from a mentorship point of view, guide and actually assist the businesses in terms of their understanding, and that's a joint learning process. So
Okay.
I think depending on the industry, the sector, we bring specialists on so that that expertise is transferred so that the businesses know exactly what to ask and when, and are able to succinctly zone in on the key factors of what they should be tracking and tracing. But it is absolutely a journey. I think it's about who's actually on board. Depending on the size of the business, the industry, then we would bring in relevant people to support. So I hear you. It's entirely dependent on the business, the industry, and what sort of support we're actually providing.
Perfect. Nat, very brief.
Yeah, I'll do a disclaimer first. I don't attend those meetings, but I can tell you that for SAPI, it's part of the license to operate. And the reason I'm saying that is whatever we do is anchored on the Sustainability UN SDG. And those conversation is that if you can't do some of these things, your profit, you won't even realize it. And in fact, you won't even get a license to be able to run a business in South Africa. So for me, it's a no-brainer, because really by doing that well, you create value, you've got stable communities, you deal with job creation and economic activities within the communities where you operate, and it translates into the value of the share, because even investors, though, other than your shareholders, look at it to say, what is SAPI doing responsibly as a company?
Okay, got it. Bright, sir, I hope you're still with us. I mean, we've been doing quite a bit of talking in the past hour. We've got 5 minutes left. In this 5 minutes, I'd like to ask what actions going forward, less talking, but what actions going forward should we take, and what actions are you committing to taking, sir, to ensure more impact in supporting young entrepreneurs?
So I think the point has been made repeatedly that we have to take a value chain perspective to all of this discussion, and that is important. The only challenge is that it's still a very fragmented continent. It's fragmented not only in terms of the way that industry behaves, we've been talking about that for an hour now, but it's also fragmented because the geographies themselves are not always very viable units for economic production. So the Continental Free Trade Agreement is very critical. Now, we've had different trade liberalization schemes for many years, and they have not had the transformative impact that they've had. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, what is it about the after, apart from the added agency that it provides, that could lead to a situation where small businesses use Africa as a springboard to build competitiveness? Because export capacity building has all around the world been the engine driver for economic transformation everywhere we've gone. If you look at South Korea, if you look at Germany, look at all of these other countries, it's building export capacity that made their firms very competitive. Now, because the global value chain ecosystem is not very favorable to us as African SMEs and African startups, we have to start with the African value chain network. And that value chain network means, therefore, that beyond just talking about what we can do with big businesses within our own country, we have to take a more regional perspective. And people like myself have been very active in trying to say, how do we use informal business networks as the operating system for building regional value chains? And how do we build friendships across the border? How do we use organizations like Shared Value Network that is emerging, these normative networks that are emerging? How do we use that as the foundation to build large-scale informal business networks across the whole continent? So if our friends in Malawi are more likely to be able to do business in Malawi, and often we don't pay enough attention to those cultural linkages. I think as far as regional value chains in economic terms is concerned, culture is precedent. So building that Pan-African cultural movement, that mindset that we want, is more critical than ever. Lastly, within our own countries as small businesses, we constitute a political force because the vast majority of businesses are small businesses. The vast majority of entrepreneurial activities, one man, one woman businesses and the like. Small enterprises, therefore, if they become politically awakened, I think can have a huge impact on the policies that are made, which will then have a recycling effect across the board, whether it's access to finance, improve access to markets, improve access to improve regulations, that will address
Right,
this, like,
I'm
unfair
going to have
competition,
to.
et
I'm going to
cetera.
have to jump in there. So sorry, it's just this tick
No problem.
clock
Thank
is
you.
coming in. But got you. Small businesses need to be a little bit more politically woke, perhaps going forward, and therefore the pressure is on. In a 27-character tweet, first sentence. Just what are you leaving us with in terms of the actions that can, or that we can take to be more impactful in growing young entrepreneurs? 27 characters, Beatrice.
Yes, I think we have to keep pressure on the public sector and the private sector to maintain the dialogue, but to go from talking to action by creating the mechanism that will support the startup.
Perfect. Keep pressure on the public and the private sector to maintain the dialogue. Namala?
I think that we're all about rebuilding and redefining, and I urge entrepreneurs to do the homework, ask the questions that needs to be asked.
Rebuild, redefine, do the homework, and ask the questions. Nat?
Yeah, collaborate more. Big business, public sector, even ourselves in the region, we need to make sure that we create more opportunities and work together, simplify the systems and harmonize the way we do it so that we
Okay.
can then talk about the rest of Africa.
Okay. Collaborate more, simplify the processes so we can work better together. Omondi, sir? 10 seconds.
Yes, I think we have to digitize, transform. There's a lot of value for data, and that's an area where we need to be much, much better than we are at the moment.
Okay. Digitize, transform, maximize the value from data. Thank you, and thank you for being on time. That brings this discussion to a close. I'd like to thank all of you. Please, a round of applause to the panelists. Handing it back to the wonderful host, Simba and Mumbi. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Fifi, and thank you all the members from this very excellent panel. What a rich discussion. There's so many points that we can reflect on. You know, we've talked a lot today about partnerships, and I think that people in this room and those who are joining us online have much more experience than I do about partnerships. But the little experience I do know about it is that, yes, they can unlock a lot of opportunities, but the experience sometimes also tends to be rather complex, so to say. So I think even as we think about what those partnerships look like, I think it's also thinking about how do we make them work. Another thing I also thought of, just building up on that discussion on what are shareholders asking about. You know, I don't know whether people saw that, you know, one of the most heavily criticized companies right now is ExxonMobil. And they have an investor who owns about 0.02% of the entire stock. And that investor is called Engine One. It's a hedge fund, and they are actively pushing for ExxonMobil to replace its entire board. So, because of course the reason behind that being that ExxonMobil is not moving quickly enough to move away from fossil fuels. So yes, I think that there's a renewed understanding from the shareholder that they do need to take into consideration where their money goes. And I feel that even here locally or regionally, there is that discussion starting. It may be slow, but we're going to get there. I also wanted to reflect a little bit on what Mr. Simon said, and I just will connect it to what I had mentioned earlier today, which is how, and he has said it very well, how do we enable more strong collaborations between MSMEs? What does that look like regionally? Okay, and this is where this aspect of trust comes in. And we've talked today a lot about putting in the structural mechanisms, having the agreement in place. We've talked about, access to finance, affordable finance. But perhaps what we also need to think more strongly about is when we're talking about this African unity, having an African identity, north to south, what does that mean? And what does it take for us to entirely feel connected as a people? Because I do think if we don't think about that, then these other things become very difficult to implement. Also, there was a talk about a paradigm shift, an entrepreneurial mindset. This is something, again, we, as also higher education institutions are rather becoming obsessed with. How do we make our students more daring, more courageous, more willing to be job creators and not just people going into different sectors looking for work? It's complex. It's complex, but I think that also when I look at South African universities, I'm happy to say that some strides are being taken towards that end. Before I bring Simba in also to give his observations, I just wanted to bring in this aspect that has been coming out through the day as well. Being a woman and being a woman in business. And we've talked a lot about this. I think we will continue to talk about it tomorrow. It is one of the SDGs that we are very much going to discuss in this summit. But it's starting by asking, when we were talking about, things probably now are better for women, but then when I look at the gender gap report, the dimension of economic participation and inclusion is the second largest gap that women are experiencing. So it's a different time. I do think a lot of women have it easier than it was before, and before is relative. But there are still barriers. So the question then is, as we're thinking about opening up the economy, cooperation, partnership, how then do we open this up for everybody so that everybody can benefit? I'll bring in Simba also, just to provide some ideas on what has been discussed so far. As I said, I can talk about this endlessly, so I do not want to overwhelm people. But Simba, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I think as I introduce the next session, which is breaking down barriers, I think the interesting thing that I've observed is growing up, I think, Pat, there was a description of how when you did agriculture or you did woodwork or you did building in high school, it was mainly because you're not so bright. But now, many years later, after high school, those same guys are becoming the people that employ us boffins to count their money, if you happen to be an accountant. But also, there was a lot of talk about SMEs or large companies bringing in SMEs as part of the value chain. And I always say, sometimes it should also be balanced as well, in that SMEs should also be encouraged to establish their own value chains, because the SMEs don't work very well together, right? If I start to supply, for argument's sake, SAPI, or I start to supply AB InBev, or I start to supply Old Mutual, I tend to want to do it alone and show off to the rest of my friends, right? I never ever think that we must establish our own ecosystems as SMEs that will give us enough critical mass for the enterprise division of a Nedbank, a Standard, or an Absa Bank to then view you as bankable as well. Also, let's look at the governance structures of the companies that we're also supporting as well. It's also difficult for a bank to lend to Simba Muriro Enterprises when I don't have the right structures, governance, the right accounting tools as part of my business, right? So I'm not saying that I should be able to afford to hire an accountant or to hire a lawyer, but that's also an opportunity for me to pretty much give consulting gigs to my colleagues who happen to be experts in accounting, the back of house services as well, to create that critical mass. Procurement also must lead to bankability, right? So larger companies should be able to forward their balance sheets to allow their suppliers which do not have strong balance sheets to be able to access financing as well. And then the misconception about young entrepreneurs, I think we also must be critical and accept the fact that, yes, in some cases we have success stories, but in other cases we also have horror stories of loans and investors' money that does get lost. I think we must always strike a balance and say, listen, as much as we want to support young entrepreneurs, but we must also face the reality and the risks that are there to support these young businesses and educate them on why, for example, in my country, just like South Africa, the banks are anti-greenfield. We quite frankly don't lend to new startups. And when I went into banking, I was very adverse to it, but now that I'm on the inside, I can understand why, and that lots of money tends to be lost, right? And it's not only the banks that get held back, but it's the regulatory environment as well. Who then answers to the Reserve Bank of South Africa? Who then answers to whichever regulatory agency or the Ministry of Finance? Because it's all well and good when it's probably election year, or it's all well and good when you can take pictures. But the day your financial results come back and you've got non-performing loans that are above a certain percentage, people now have to defend those with their lives. So is this something that SMEs also understand? So in light of this, I'd like to bring in the last panel discussions, breaking down barriers, and hopefully from the previous discussion and some of the thought-provoking comments and questions that have come about, they can show us how they're doing it and show the audiences online, lists tuning in, how they've come about it. And our facilitator for this will be Andrew Akoto Ado. Andrews, I'll just use your first name before I murder your last name, is impact-oriented and passionate about leadership, social entrepreneurship, and business development. He serves as a business developer and startup consultant in Ghana, which we all, from Zimbabwe, we always say Ghana are in-laws. He's primarily engaged in startup incubation, acceleration, startup business advisory support. You got one hell of a headache, mate, because I work with startups, so they can be a headache. But welcome, Andrew, and good luck with your panel.
As they come up, sorry, Andrew, I just want to say, please take note of their beautiful outfits. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Simba. Thank you, Mumbi. Awesome. Okay, so that's been a very exciting day, personally, and I'm sure that everybody is enjoying themselves with the insights, with the depth of knowledge being shared here, especially for the conversation that just ended. When I think about big business and entrepreneurship, there's a lot of things that run through my mind. I mean, as someone in the space, startup development and also acceleration programs, being an incubator myself, and also someone who actually look for the investment for these early stage and later stage startups. It's kind of very difficult creating that linkages with big business. So I found it so insightful, and thank you all. And also, just to reiterate the comments passed by, sorry, I might not be able to mention the name, Omombi. He said big business must deploy capital for the startups. And that's part of the challenge in our part of the world, where startups are finding it very difficult to access capital. The Talent Business Development Support Program, Tailored Business Development Support Program. So kudos to Nemala. I think you're doing amazing work as an accelerator also. So at this juncture, I think I have to welcome our entrepreneurs. They're wonderful people, young people that are breaking down barriers and doing a lot in the space. The first to actually sit with me is my brother from Nigeria, Ben Okpala. These are entrepreneurs that have been a part of the first cohort of the Purpose Playbook training, and then also the second cohort of the Shared Value Purpose Playbook training. Thank you very much, Ben. Ben is the co-founder of Kiru Energy in Nigeria. Kiru does a lot in the space of renewable energy, solar, and then also making sure that Nigeria gets everybody electrified. All right? Okay. We are facing that challenge here, right? So we need more electricity. Okay, so the next is Dr. Edmond Amu. Edmond is a Ghanaian, my fellow Ghanaian. He's a co-CEO of and head of clinical department, Kinok Herbal, in Ghana. Thank you very much, Enoch. Please, let's give it up. It's not easy to sit here, actually. Let me say it's not easy to sit here. Kudos to all the panelists. I mean, We are young people, so we'd like to make it more exciting, please. Put in more energy also with us with the claps. Thank you. The next is Francesca Munyi, the co-founder for Kofa. Francesca, founder of Kofa from Kenya. Thank you, Francesca. The last, but not the least, Bless Amasechi is the founder of Kweni Jom and CEO of Kweni Jom. Kweni Jom is it's a digital platform, actual agri-tech business in Ghana. Okay, so this conversation is going to be brief, but yet insightful, and it's supposed to actually set the tone for other entrepreneurs, people watching us live, young entrepreneurs in the space to believe in what they are doing, that they can actually achieve, they can actually succeed in their industry. We know the obvious challenges. We are faced with a number of them. So these entrepreneurs are going to give us that more or less like the inspiration that, okay, we faced it, but we overcame it. And this is how we did it, all right? We faced it, we overcame it, and this is how we did it. And so just to reiterate that some of them are, especially the ladies, they are actually in the agricultural space, and I know they were not dropouts, all right? So they are actually educated, and they are practicing it as their passion. And so I'll start from Francesca. Let us know that you didn't drop us from school. I want to appreciate your journey. So how's it been for you leading Kofa?
Okay, so is this the 4-minute pitch?
Yeah.
Okay.
Kofa, how's it been for you? What's the journey? I mean, tell us the journey, how you started, breaking down those barriers. Did you actually face it? And actually, we know female founders have a lot of challenges. Did you face something closer to telling you that you can't do it? Or you actually faced something that told you that, man, I can't do it, I can't do it. Yeah, that sort of thing.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Francisca Munyi, as he has said, and yes, I'm educated. I hold a master's in social entrepreneurship.
Told you.
And I choose agriculture as the area that I would like to have impact on people's lives. So, Kofa is a social enterprise. We recycle vegetative waste. We turn it into fortified compost so that we can hold more moisture and reverse acidity, especially in Kenya. It's a big issue because we have so many of our farmers who are making losses from agriculture because their soil is so degraded. And as we are going to the climate smart system, this is one way of the circular economy that we are looking into. Now, as he's asking whether we have challenges or all Kofa had challenges as a woman, I would say there were many. Being in a soil sector space, it was a man's world. Even agriculture still, even now, it's a man's world in Kenya. So also the background I had wasn't agriculture. So it wasn't very easy, but the beautiful thing with being a woman is that when you go humble and you ask the men for help, they are willing to help. So, now, in the spirit of partnership and talking to the big boys or the big companies that are already here, I would like to give a shared value effect of what would happen if giants like Safaricom and Absa and Old Mutual would partner with Kofa. We are having a project that we are planting 1 million macadamia trees in Western Region. And at the moment, Western Region, so many of the farmers are so poor, yet they have a lot of idle land. And here we have corporations like Safaricom who are busy planting trees in the forest that at times they don't even monitor how many survive. So macadamia trees being a nut and a hardwood is a tree that when you plant in your farm, it can generate over $60 annually for a farmer. With even just an acre, they would have 100 trees. Now, why Kofa is so keen on that one is because when we plant 1 million macadamia trees in that region, we have users for our product, so we have a market for our business. Still, we have a turnover that can be able to attract investors to come and help us scale up Kofa's work which is repairing soils. Number two is that even these big organizations would have a sustainable system for their CSR. Now, what is that effect to the farmer? They will have a steady source of income. We'll still be greening the community. We would be talking about fixing so much carbon in the soils that Kenya would also be recorded in one of those books where we are catering for the environment.
Amazing.
So in the shared value that I learned in my recent training, and that's why we educated women in agriculture, is that there is a lot to learn.
Let's give it up for the purpose-level training.
And we are really, really requesting so many of you who are here today, partner with COFA. Let's give it a trial. And as the banks have said, some of us are not bankable. If I actually had partners who would do 1 million trees, the turnover is so much that I have a feeling so many banks would be coming for us and we would become bankable overnight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francesca, for telling us your story, your journey, and then also telling big business that you can do something amazing and they should put their money where the work is.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. All right, so I'm going to go to a gentleman now. Bless thought I was going to her, but Bless, relax, don't worry. All right, so I'm going to go to my Niger man here. He's looking at Igwe. So Igwe, what's the journey for you? I mean, yourself with Kiro Energy. How's it been for you?
Okay, thank you, Andrew.
And also a bit of big business push. So that we...
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. My name is Benedict. I'm from Nigeria. I'm the co-founder of Kiru Energy Limited. Kiru Energy is a clean energy company. So at Kiru, we are developing a digital solution to address the problem of power instability, unreliability, and unaffordability. So we do this by connecting our customers to our solar smart grid system via our mobile application, which grants our customers access to buy energy on demand using a pay-as-you-go model. So with our solution, the customer does not get to pay for the high initial capital involved in setting up a solar energy system. So why do we do what we do at Kiru? From IMF reports, 2019, they stated clearly that Nigerian businesses alone loan on a loss of $29 billion annually. And I was particularly intrigued by a statement when they were introducing this company on the TV ads, Jami. They stated that 48% of Nigerian GDP comes from SMEs. So you can imagine how these SMEs, which are part of this Nigerian business, that lose $29 billion annually. So anybody that comes from Nigeria, you know that power is a very big problem. And that's where Kiru comes in. Another important thing to note is the awareness for use of clean energy is already there. But the big challenge is how many average homes and businesses can afford clean energy solutions? These things are very expensive. So this is exactly where Kiru comes in. We are getting renewable energy down to the lowest person in the society. So a little bit about our history. We started back in my school days with my co-founder, 2018. So when we started as Unicycle. That's our initial name. At Unicycle, we focused on waste management and recycling. So towards 2019, we transitioned and pivoted into a full energy company. So that was when we are registered in Nigeria as a fully incorporated business. So moving forward, by late 2020, we discovered that the name Renecycle does not resonate with our purpose and our philosophy. Thanks to the purpose training that, purpose playbook training that gave us the direction we wanted and then opened our mind. So by mid-2021 this year, we decided to go into a full rebranding of our company. And that's where Kiru Energy was born. So the name Kiru actually came from an Igbo expression. I'm from the southeastern part of Nigeria. That's why you see me dressed like this. There is this expression said in Kiruka, means greater lies ahead, or you could say the future is better. So that's where we carved the Kiru for, because we believe that we are a future of energy in Nigeria. So our vision is to be the prime provider of clean and sustainable electricity across Africa. Awesome. So starting growing a company in Nigeria as a student, has not been all rosy for us, personally, in terms of access to funding, in terms of financing and support. It was not easy for us. We had a lot of challenges, trying to pitch your ideas. There was a time we just had half-baked ideas and the vibes. So it wasn't easy for us. So secondly, I and my co-founder, we have technical backgrounds. I myself am an electrical electronics engineering by training. So you can imagine someone from the technical field trying to dive into business. So it wasn't easy for us, but we got the motivation, personally for ourselves. We are particularly interested in what we do. We have this change makers mindset, and that's actually what kept us moving.
Awesome.
So I would say that so far so good. Things have been going well. By 2019, we started getting some fundings. I think remember the first time we got some grants from this company, Sigma Pensions. Thanks to them, they gave us a sum of $620. It was like a mind blowing for us. Like someone gave you money for just pitching your business for 5 minutes. Wow, that's wonderful. So
we touch base with the mind-blowing aspects of your business.
Yeah.
All right. But I'm particularly excited about you finding that name that resonates with the culture. I mean, where you come from.
Yeah.
Is that what lighten the world or light?
Nkiruka.
Nkiruka.
Nkiruka, meaning better days ahead, or the future is brighter.
One Africa, one voice. All right. Nkiruka. We all say it. Nkiruka. Brighter days ahead.
Better days ahead.
Better days
ahead, yeah.
Awesome. So we've learned something here, Nigerian Igbo word, Nkiruka. Thank you very much for that story.
Thank you.
Edmond, what's your journey? How has it been? And what can you share with us?
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here today. I would like to thank Tiki and the Shared Value Academy for having us. So our story started as Kinnock HG Herbal Clinic. And Kinnock HG Herbal Clinic, we're a herbal company based in Ghana. We manufacture scientific-based herbal medicines from medicinal plants that are cultivated. We also have 3 clinics in 3 different regions in Ghana. Then we also run mobile clinic where we go to communities where access to basic health care is poor. There we offer health educations to the community, we run health screenings, then we give them herbal medications for treatments. We are also venturing into medicinal plant farming, where we cultivate plants that we use in manufacturing our own medicines. So Kinnock HG Herbal Clinic started as Kinnock Herbal Services and HG Herbal Clinic. My colleague, Dr. Enoch, and I were unemployed graduates of KNUST, that's Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. And we decided to partner in order to at least open a company that would create employment for us and others like us. Because in Ghana, most of the health sectors are unemployed, such as the lab technicians, the community health nurses, and the nurses in general. Unemployment is very high, so creating something could help us and help them as well. So my colleague and I, starting up individually was very challenging. We were not able to get funds for ourselves, but when we partnered, we were able to join the resources that we had. And we were fortunate to be winners of entrepreneurship challenges, such as the National Entrepreneurship and Innovation Program and the Youth in Sustainable Development Challenge. And my partner and I, we have the passion to serve our community. That's one driving force that connected us both. So we try as much as possible to recruit people of similar passion. Joining the Shared Value Academy was very, very, very impactful for us because we were able to define our purpose, which is promoting good health. And this purpose resonates very well with our clients, our partners, and also our workers. Being an entrepreneur has never been easy, more so in this COVID-19 pandemic era. And our health screening that we were going on, we had a challenge with it when lockdown came. We couldn't go on these health screenings, so we had to take a different approach to this. So what we did is we connected with community health nurses via social media and started piloted community-based clinics. So what we do is we send basic laboratory test materials such as the typhoid test, the malaria test, the BP monitoring devices, and the blood sugar monitoring devices, among others, to the communities so that the community health nurses would perform the test over there for their community. Then we come in, consult via phone or WhatsApp, prescribe the appropriate medications for the clients. Then we also do feedback. We take feedback from the clients, whether they are feeling better, whether they are improving, and how the services that they are getting at the community is to them.
Fantastic.
We made a lot of mistakes along the way, but it's expected as young entrepreneurs. And this served as a point to at least help us grow and help us know what not to repeat in our endeavors. So our dream is to make our products accessible in Africa and the world at large, and we encourage partners to come and join us in realizing this dream. And I would also like to tell our young entrepreneurs that entrepreneurship is not easy. You would face numerous challenges, but I know there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Thank
awesome. You. So you have just touched base on Nkuruka. There's lights indeed. Better days ahead. Yeah. Thank you so much for that experience shared there. Bless, what's the story? How's it been for you building Kwenijum?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. My name is Bless Amasachi, and I am the co-founder of Kwenijum. So it's a core team of 4. And the journey so far, I should say, has not been easy. So my journey in the, let me say a bit about my background, so my educational background. So I am a product of Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. I have a BA degree in tourism. And then I have a postgraduate certificate in entrepreneurship in emerging economies from Harvard. So I've done nothing.
Our entrepreneurs are really educated.
So I have done nothing in tech or agriculture to be in this space that I'm in. So our journey began last year, before the pandemic, early last year, like somewhere in January, where we were tasked by Cosmos Innovation Center, powered by Cosmos Energy, in the Agritech Challenge to go around Ghana and then speak to farmers and find out problems they faced in the agri value chain, and then come back to build a business that, tackles those challenges. And I was able to fit into this space mainly because of that opportunity. I had the chance to partner with people from various skills background. So in my team, for example, I am the marketing person, so I'm more of a business-oriented person. I don't have any background in tech or agri, like I said, but there's somebody who has a tech background, there's another who has an economics background, and there's somebody who has an agri background. So we combined all our skill sets and then came up with this web-based platform, Kwenijum, that aims to tackle challenges farmers in remote communities in Ghana. In Ghana, most of our farming communities are based in the remote parts where it's not motorable, like their roads are really bad. So these farmers don't have it easy, like getting their produce to the market centers in the big towns where they are needed. But, the irony of that too is that a lot of the produce that they make, ends up rotting on the farms, and then just a small portion of it ends up in, the towns, and then they become expensive for those who purchase. So that was where we had to come in to bridge that gap between the farmers on one hand and then consumers. So the journey so far has not been easy, like I said. In the initial stages, Cosmos Energy founded the research process, but after that, it's been bootstrapping from the team. We had to be funding everything by ourselves, and that's not easy. So, I'm here today to, let's say, build partnerships and friendships and network into relationships that will make our business strong and then push us forward.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Bless. So I get that impression from you. I mean, you did not find yourself in agriculture because, of bad luck. No. Or not going to school, but you rather found yourself in agriculture out of identify certain passion based on what a big business like Cosmos created an innovation program for you to be a part of. You joined the team, and then you discovered the idea. You found a problem, and then you tailored a solution towards that problem. It is something that we always want to encourage entrepreneurs to. I mean, entrepreneurs are actually solution providers, right? Yeah. They find problems, they find a solution for those problems. And then we also ask ourselves, where is the money to scale up those solutions? So in your case, I mean, what was probably the biggest challenge for you after identifying that problem, gathering knowledge and insight to tailor a solution towards it, building something like a web-based platform to create access for farmers from remote areas to be able to, I mean, take their produce to their intended market? Yeah. What's the one challenge that you faced that actually nearly, maybe if nearly, took you out of your space, or did it actually re-energize you to be like, hey, I want to continue regardless? Or did you find a big business to give you something?
Okay, so to us, the big problem, even though I said that we were bootstrapping, was not finance, but rather more knowledge on what we were working on.
Awesome.
And so that was why I was so excited to be picked by Tiki and her team to be part of the cohorts that took part in the
Purpose Playbook.
Yeah, because that program really was an eye-opener. We realized that there was still a lot we needed to learn on what we're doing. So, for example, at a point, Tiki had to rephrase our slogan. So at first, we were saying, eat fresh every day. But after going through the training, we realized that what we're doing was more than what our slogan was saying. So together, we rephrased it to premium products, faster delivery. And then again, we realized that there was still more we could do after doing the Purpose Playbook training. There was still more we could do to help these farmers in terms of only getting them faster markets. So we decided to scale and then add on 2 other services that was very relevant to them.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, knowledge is very important, so you had that. Let me comment about, I wanted to say this because it has been on my mind. I like your outfit, Francesca. We like her outfit, right? Amazing. I had to say it before asking her the question, you know, it was really on my mind. I love it. Francesca, yes. One huge challenge, the barrier that you had to overcome. I mean, this conversation is about agile. We've heard people like Bright Simmons, the previous panelists, highlight the need for entrepreneurs to be agile, to be quick in their thinking, to find a way of processing certain things within their business, to even attract the big business, or probably find big business, certain loopholes or certain things that big business does that they can integrate or capitalize on to be able to scale. What is your barrier? Did you find something? Are you actually handling or trying to solve something within your scope of operation that you can actually share with us and inspire somebody out there for us?
Yeah, I would say for COFA, the biggest challenge we had was when we discovered that the big issue with the yields for the farmers was the soil. And most of the institutions were not really aware back in 2009 that soil fertility was a big issue in Kenya. We created the products thinking that we would just go from our COFA products to the farmers, but then we had to go through research and approval by the government. It wasn't very affordable at that time. Going around hunting for funds or people to support us wasn't easy because everybody kept asking, so what are you doing? And they say, no, we are repairing soils. Oh, soil is sick. And it was almost funny for them. It wasn't funny for us. And then the next question was, your turnover is so small. So how do we get a big turnover when we don't have money to get the approvals and reach to the market? So we were in between a hard rock and a very serious stone. And it wasn't very funny. But now why I'm saying about partnerships and why I would encourage so many small entrepreneurs to partner with others, even other SMEs.
Wonderful.
And then grow a little bit and now be able to have presentable figures is because the investors only want to check the figures. the impact investors also want to check how many farmers have you helped? How do I reach to so many farmers when I can't afford the fare to go to them? Then when we come to the big giants, they have no time to even listen to, what are you talking about? So we want to plant the trees. We don't have to add organic inputs to keep this tree alive. All they want to do is to plant a tree. So we are telling them, if we partnered and we planted that tree that they want, but we plant the tree that we choose, because the farmer now will gain, the farmer will take care of the tree. So there will be survival. Then as we'll have the revenues, then the investor will see the figures and will scale up. After Kenya, we can go everywhere in Africa.
Wow.
We still need food and clean food for everyone.
Amazing. We still need food and clean food for everyone. I love it. Awesome. Did a lot of work there, trying to connect research, connect other SMEs. I mean, this is great. And this can only be done by an entrepreneur, an agile entrepreneur as such. Thank you so much. Let me talk to Igwe. Igwe, what is the one challenge that Kiru faced in your development phase that you can actually point to and be like, this challenge, this barrier that we overcame is the springing board, or it's like the springboard of our success or intended successes that we will possibly chalk? What can you share with us?
Okay, one particular challenge I think we faced was the same challenge that most entrepreneurs face. There's this saying that it's easy to have $1 billion idea, but transforming that $1 billion idea to $1 billion company, that's where the work comes in. So starting off, we had ideas, but there's always this friction the moment you are trying to get to that level where you prototype your idea and you prove your concept. So I just kind of shortened our history. Well, when we started, there were a lot of things we had in mind, moving forward. There was a time we talked about installation. There was a time we talked about going into hardware manufacturing of inverter systems, designing it ourselves. There's a lot we've done in the past. And that's kind of, each time we do this, it's kind of, we spend a lot of time trying to iterate, trying to grow the idea. At the end, everything flops. So one major method that we use is that our flexibility. So we are very, very flexible to knowledge. We are not very orthodox and strict to a particular belief system. We believe so much that we need to build a profitable business, and for you to do that as an entrepreneur, you need that flexibility in idea. So, and that's what got us to where we are, based on the new product model we are doing right now. So that flexibility of ours, that helps us to, navigate through those challenges of growing a business from that idea level to the prototype level and then commercialization. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that journey. There is the idea conceptualization. There is the identifying a prototype, a minimum viable product, something that the investor will see there and be like, okay, you want to do something.
Yeah.
I mean, that growth pattern and finding that, the inspiration to continue within that space. As a business developer, I'll say, pat at your back, kudos, man.
Thank you.
All right. Edmond, what is, the same question, right? Yeah. You get the rationale already. Point us to one challenge, the barrier that you had to overcome. Was it from the government? I'm sorry. Sorry, government. So tell us something, a barrier you overcame.
Okay, so one major challenges that we had is, herbal medicine, it's something new.
Exactly.
In the professional space, it's something new. Normally, when you come to Ghana, when we say a herbalist or someone who is a herbalist, it's a sort of a traditional person sitting somewhere preparing concoctions and others. So the perception of herbal medicine was very bad. And we were new coming out of university, and when you hear, oh, someone has attended university and is now a medical herbalist, you wonder, is he the same as the one preparing concoctions in some corner? So, yes, that was very, very challenging. So what we did was we tried to educate the community. Normally, when we go on these screenings, we have PA systems that we talk to them. We tell them now herbal medicine is something that is being taught in universities. We've added scientific methods to it, scientific backing, and whatever we do or whatever we bring out has the scientific basis, and they are approved to be used for medicines. Then when it came to registering our products, we had a lot of challenges
Can you imagine,
there.
man?
Because the bureaucracy in Ghana, normally when it comes to registering products, the giants or the big companies have it easy. But when you are starting up to register a product in Ghana, it wasn't easy at all. Our products are 3 actually, and it took us close to 2 years just to register these products. And it was because of all this bureaucracy, the processes that you have to go through, that I would say bigger companies they didn't go through. But fortunately for us, we were able to sail through them and bring the products out.
Awesome. I'm happy to know you were able to overcome those barriers. I mean, those systems that are in place. Bureaucratic, I don't want to, okay, let me hold myself. Thank you. But we want to actually talk to public sector people. That part of the things that keeps entrepreneurs like this in the space to want to even do what they want to do is when you are a bit flexible. Build systems that encourages someone to want to build a business. I mean, we are currently going along the trajectory that we need more job creators. The youth unemployment rate is ever increasing than ever. And Africa is fully youth. And the youth must be given the chance. So this is just my advocacy. All right, we need you. Thank you for listening. All those online also, we want to say thank you all for following. And please continue to follow the conversation. Hashtag ASVLS2021. No, 21, right? ASVLS21. Continue encouraging other young entrepreneurs to follow through. Tell a friend to tell another friend that we are having conversations about how entrepreneurs are overcoming barriers. It is amazing. At this material moment, I want us to share an inspiration, okay? This is something that you have to say from your stomach, from the bottom of your heart, that entrepreneurship is doable, that somebody out there can do it. They should put their mind to something in your own words. I mean, I like talking, but please, say it in your own words. Let me start from Bless. What do you want to say to someone in Ghana, someone in Nigeria, a young person who wants to start a business?
So I just want to say that the only limits that we have are limits that we place upon ourselves, and that with focus, determination, and resilience, you can achieve whatever endeavor it is that you want to achieve, no matter how difficult it proves to be in the beginning. You always find ways to overcome them in the end.
Fantastic. You did that within a tweet. So awesome. Let's all follow. I mean, tweeting is like 282 characters, right? So, Francesca.
Okay, what I would like to say to all the entrepreneurs out there is that even if you have a very big dream, if you break it down into small projects that you can be able to do with time, you realize that you are remotivating yourself and you're not feeling like you are fading. Also, when you have a purpose and you find a very happy farmer because he used your product and he got more yields, it makes you now go back to working more and finding ways of how to tackle it. So when we break it down, even when we are fundraising, instead of asking for the big money at once, you can break it into small projects within your big dream, and you'll still get to where you're going.
Thank you so much for that. Edmond.
Okay, so what I would like to say is that entrepreneurs should know that being an entrepreneur, it takes time for you to make it. People feel when you enter the entrepreneurship space, you are supposed to make it in the shortest possible time, but it isn't so. It takes time, and it takes your passion and your determination and the work you put in. That is what is going to make you who you are. And never forget, you would make the mistakes, but let them be something that you learn from, something that would help you grow, and something that would teach you what to do and what not to do. And in the end, you'll be a successful person in future.
Fantastic. Yeah. I like that. Thank you so much. Kiruka, what do you have to share?
Okay, what I want to say is, a problem, and I just discovered that most young entrepreneurs used to have, or young minds who want to venture into entrepreneurship. A lot of us always think that you don't have enough knowledge, you don't have sufficient business knowledge, you don't have an MBA, you don't have the funding. But what I want to tell you is, you can't figure it out once. You can't. So you just start with what you have. In the words of Mark Zuckerberg, he said, ideas don't come fully formed. So you can just, with what you know at the moment, you could just start, and then you learn on the go. And that's particularly for me, and because I've been there, I had technical background, wanted to go into business, and I know what it took us. So be courageous enough, be bold enough to take that decision, and at the end, there's always light at the tunnel. At the end of the tunnel.
Thank you so much, Benedict, for that. Let's give it up for them. All right. Thank you. So thank you all. So this is the time that we'll go to Mentimeter. We are doing this in less than 30 seconds. So let us all go to Mentimeter. In our view, what is the biggest challenge African entrepreneurs face? We can simply scan the code or just go to the key words, the code, right? 20380167 and key in that. Is it access to finance and all that? All right, so there are pop-ups so far. We have access to finance, access to market. Finance is top. All right. Access to market, access to funding, and government policies. Government policies being human-friendly, being systems, accurate systems for them to be able to register their business and drive their progress. So thank you all for sharing your story. One thing that came on top of this whole conversation for me is the learning attitude, the knowledge acquisition part of the entrepreneurship process, and the research, partnering with like-minded people to drive the same agenda. I want to say kudos to you all for the efforts that you put in what you're doing. Keep on keeping on, and let's together build Africa and make it great as we all want it to be. So thank you all for listening. Thank all our viewers, all people connecting all over the continent for being a part of the conversation. This is the time that we draw the curtains and say goodbye for now. Thank you. All right.
Oh, thank you very much indeed, Andrew. Actually, the panelists were part of the Purpose Playbook training, which the Shared Value Africa Initiative organized, and I was very happy to be participating there together with Tiki and team, and it's amazing to see them here and talking about their experiences, which we often discussed in those late night classes. So without further ado, we're approaching the end of the program. But before we do so, I would like to invite our next guest to give the closing and the wrap-up. That is Emmanuel Deytumi, President and Chief Copywriter, Human Capital International. Emmanuel Deytumi is one of Africa's most respected authors, corporate trainers, and keynote speakers on subjects such as strategic leadership, creative entrepreneurship education, customer service architecture, and soft skills development. He leads Human Capital International, a people's startups and SMEs-focused development business entity. He has also pioneered the establishment of a number of enterprises and organizations. So as you can see, we really don't have anybody else who is well-placed to give us that closing and wrap up. Welcome, Emmanuel. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you very much. And I think we've spent almost the whole day here. So let me, rather than making a speech or whatever, I rather want us to leave here with some questions instead. Questions that I believe is a summary of some of the things that we've discussed here. And I'm glad that the young people have attempted to sort of summarize the entire challenges that I think that we all need to start thinking about. So my first question I want to pose as we leave this place to go and reflect and come back tomorrow, we're talking about one Africa, one voice. My first question is, whose voice are we talking about? When we say one Africa and one voice, are we talking about the voice of government, the voice of the private sector, the voice of the educated entrepreneurs, the voice of the uneducated entrepreneurs, and what have you. I'm sure if we were to take a poll here and ask the question, how many of us have or know people in our villages that are, for example, into farming, who are not educated, but if we engage them in a focus group discussion on this stage, we will be amazed the kind of revelations, the kind of ideas that would come from the narrative that we've all seen throughout the day. What we are seeing here, ladies and gentlemen, is not new. We've seen it for years. I mean, for most of us who have attended most of these international conferences, the narrative, the discussions are, they just go around like that. So the question is, if we are talking about one Africa, one voice, whose voice are we talking about? We're talking about Africa's shared value. Who defines the value? What does the value mean to us? So these are some of the things that I think that as we go back, we need to start thinking about them. We're talking about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, ladies and gentlemen. And the question that keeps coming to me, and as being a trainer and an entrepreneur myself over 30 years, I ask the question, for example, how do our folks in the villages, for example, participate in Africa Continental Free Trade Area? Take the taxation, for example. I know, for example, in Uganda, where I'm resident now, government is trying to streamline the system whereby you can use technology to do everything. Question is, how many people in Africa in the informal sector, in the SME, for example, where the majority are women, are technology friendly? And I like what Peter from Safaricom was saying. And in Uganda, one of the things we're trying to do is to pilot a project where, either insurance companies or banks can come up with a mobile phone product where they can give the handset to these women, and then they pay it on an installment basis, but then they can use it from, like he said, from a G or 2G to 4G. They can use their handheld phones to do many of the businesses that are technology friendly. And in our space as human capital, we currently have built a platform that enables people to be trained in the local dialect. So for example, we've commissioned a study where we are selecting 2 dialects in each of the 54 countries, upload them on our platform, so that whatever is being taught, whatever is happening here, you can hear them or read them in your local dialect. It doesn't have to be English. And we believe that by so doing, then we bring about inclusiveness, particularly for the women who constitute the majority on the continent and happen to be in the informal sector. So the challenge we're talking about here is, how do we get a lot more of our entrepreneurs within the SME space, ladies and gentlemen, to be inclusive in the things that we are talking about? The next question I want us to ask ourselves, and Maria, this is something that as people in academia, you need to start thinking about. I heard you talking about the fact that you want to train people to become entrepreneurs. I don't think the challenge, I don't think the issue is about people having a challenge of becoming entrepreneurs. The issue is about attitude. Because you see, as an employer myself, if you employ people into your workspace and the attitude is still about 8 to 5, this is not in my job description, and therefore I won't be able to go the extra mile to deliver what needs to be delivered. Listen, gentlemen, we're not going to be able to solve the problem. So whilst we are talking about SME development and entrepreneurship development, it is critical for us to also address the issue of attitudinal development. What is value for these young people, for example? Can we help them to develop entrepreneurial mindsets that enables them to appreciate the fact that even though I'm an employee, let me take this business as my own, so that as I grow this business, eventually I can also learn from my employer, so that if I want to become an employer myself, an entrepreneur, I become better. So maybe we need to look at, and of course this discussion has been going on for some time, can academia help us not just create a lot more entrepreneurs, but also make the concept of attitudinal issues, value, integrity, and things of that nature. We can't talk about value system without integrity. We can't talk about value system without integration, helping people to become one and whole, so that we can avoid the issue of non-compliance. People go and take loans from the bank, and the bankers will tell you, I want to buy raw material. The next time you see the guy, he's driving a new car. He's diverted the money. It all comes back to value system. It comes back to integrity. So attitude is so key. So as we go back and reflect, listen, gentlemen, the question we must ask ourselves is, how do we help our African people, our African young population, to imbibe this concept of attitudinal issues so that together we can build that concept? My last question I want us to pose, and this I may be taken on by some people, and I believe that this is something, but I have to say it. At the age of 57, I'm 57 years old, I've seen a lot in my lifetime. The question is, how do we turn the concept of religion in Africa to become an entrepreneurial, value system? On a Sunday, if you walk on the street of African street, everywhere in Africa, it's quiet. Almost everybody's in church. Monday to Saturday is a different thing altogether. Is it that poverty and Africa and religion has something in common? Or it's a mindset? I leave that to the academicians to research into that. But as we go back, listen, gentlemen, let's all begin to ask ourselves, how do we help our African folks to use entrepreneurship as a tool, not only to drive away poverty, but to create wealth and grow a lot more entrepreneurs in our system? These are my few remarks. Let's go and think about them. Thank you very much. Oh, by the way, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Emmanuel. I think that is a challenge for all of us, myself included. I do have to think about that one, the correlation with poverty, religion. It's one I've also reflected much about. Spot on about the attitudinal change, development of young people. And I think, as you have said, this is something that, and not to bring the talk, because we're really focusing on businesses here, so I don't also want to overwhelm with what universities are doing. But I think there's also a shift where we're asking, where do we place ourselves given these trends? We have a fourth industrial revolution, as Bright Simmons talked about. We have this need to create jobs very rapidly. So where do we then fit in? Because the old model or models of education do not fit into that new world. So I don't want to give comments on comments, but I think for now, my main remarks as we close for the day and reflect on the next upcoming session and tomorrow is just for us to think through some of the things we have heard today, some of the experiences that we've shared, that have been shared with us, from our entrepreneurs hungry, to make change on this continent, from Christelle's experience, her agility, her adaptability, her courage, from big business and the perspectives they've given us on how best they can support entrepreneurs, that we do not want to push the entire transformation on one sector or one organ of government, but it must be done collectively. On the potential that a trade agreement across Africa has, and that it will take much more than just having an agreement in place to bring forward the transformation that we need on this continent. My final reflection before also handing over to Simba to share his views is on leadership. That has also gone through several of the discussions, the importance of leadership and at all levels. And even when we reflect on our own experiences as leaders, what are we then doing to catalyze change? It's easy to point out what should be done. I think we tend to do that very well. But what we also want from this summit is where each of us then figure out, okay, it's one Africa, it's one voice. This is the shared value concept. So in whatever it is that I'm doing, how then do I steer forward these ideas? Simba, you can come in here as well.
Thank you, Mumbi. I think on that note, I think it's been a fantastic first day. I think I would not have done the day justice by thanking our sponsors once again Abbott, ABSA, Enel, Old Mutual, and Safaricom. Also thanking our part of our current members as well, companies that do support and are part of the Shared Value Africa initiative. We're talking of SAPI, we're talking of Nedbank, JC Decor, KCB, some of our sponsors as well, which I've mentioned. We're talking of the Gautrain as well. Without you, this movement wouldn't be possible. We hope that we can sign up more, not only established, well-heeled companies, but also SMEs as well, to join us on this particular journey. Now we're going to move on as we close off the day. We've got a light dinner, and then we can move on to the Global Summit that is starting at 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock. And that's over in the USA, that you can access online. For those that have been here today, thank you very much. Have a light dinner. Let's network. Let's get to know each other. And we look forward to seeing you on day 2. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The microphone. Excuse me, sorry. Just a quick one. As we're going for the light dinner, those who are joining in on the evening session, the Global Summit, please make sure that you're back in the room by 10 to 5. That is very important. You can bring in your food in case you won't have finished it, but please, let's just try and keep time. I know it's a tight schedule, but it is well worth it, given the lineup coming up. So see you then at 10 to 5. Thank you.